Welcome, everybody. My name is Easton Kaboshik. I serve as the Executive Director of the Soy Aquaculture Alliance. And this is we're coming to you from beautiful Kona, Hawaii, right? Neil, Dick, yes? I wish I was.
Yes.
I'm in Ankeny, Iowa, so much much less enjoyable weather here as it is over in your neck of the woods. But we're really grateful to have two very talented speakers here today. Just before we get things started, and a couple of housekeeping items. Everyone's muted. This is a Zoom webinar, obviously. So if you have questions, please submit those through the Q&A function. Everything that we'll talk about here is going to be recorded and shared afterwards on SAA channels. Really quickly, for those of you who are unfamiliar with SAA, Soy Aquaculture Alliance, as an organization, we are a group of U.S. soybean farmers and soybean checkoff funded organization. Our sole focus is in growing domestic aquaculture production, which is part of the theme of our conversation today. We see a tremendous opportunity in offshore aquaculture. And then we also, really work on the feed side. So creating value in aqua feed. The majority of our budget, about 56%, goes into aqua feed research. So solving anti-nutritional factor problems, optimizing soy-based diets, so on and so forth. We do a little bit of work on market development and education and other things like this. But yeah, so if you ever have an interest in connecting further and talking about that, please reach out. I'll have my contact information a little bit later. I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you. So we are truly funded by U.S. soybean farmers. Our membership is the soybean organizations, the state soybean organizations across the country. A shout out to Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan, Missouri, Nebraska, Ohio, South Dakota, Tennessee, and Virginia soybean farmers. They are where, what makes these kinds of opportunities possible and all of our research possible. I also want to say thank you and acknowledge our national soybean affiliates. That's the United Soybean Board, who directly funded this webinar, the American Soybean Association, U.S. Soybean Export Council, and World Initiative for Soy and Human Health. Yeah, so that's it for the pleasantries, and we can dig into the meat and potatoes, or the Ninue and Kampachi of our conversation today. So I'm very pleased to introduce Neil and Dick. I had the pleasure of actually spending time with them in beautiful Hawaii last spring and seeing their operations firsthand, learning a lot about the businesses that they've built and their extensive experience. We certainly don't have enough time to go into into depth of all of those. I know, Dick in particular, you have a world of experience in the seafood and buying side, and Neil, you've been all over the world. And your resume is quite extensive. So I won't introduce you. If you don't mind, we're going to kick it off to Neil to start our conversation today. And if you would both please take a moment just to introduce yourselves as you jump into your presentations. And then to our audience, this is intended to be as much of a dialogue as a webinar will facilitate. So I'd encourage you to please ask questions. Stay engaged. If something piques your interest, let us know using the Q&A function. And then one last caveat before we jump in. It's very difficult to talk about this topic without dancing into the regulatory side. So none of this and some of those difficult conversations, nothing that's being presented here today is intended to be anything but educational. It's more an analysis and observation of what we're working on to grow offshore aquaculture. So just want to state that explicitly. This is purely an educational webinar. Yeah, so anyway, let's toss it over to you, Neil, if you don't mind sharing your screen and introducing yourself and jumping into your presentation.
Sure, Easton. You got my screen there?
We do. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I'm Neil Anthony Sims, and I'm the founder and CEO of Ocean Era. We're an offshore aquaculture R&D company that's based here in Kona, Hawaii. I'm originally, if you can't tell by the accent, originally from Australia. I've got a lot of family in Australia that works on the land, cattle, wheat, sunflower, no corn or soy, very little corn or soy in Australia. But so I understand something of the struggles of a man on the land. I myself have been working in fisheries. I grew up on the beach in Australia and have worked in South Pacific and for the last 35 years in Hawaii. originally in fisheries management, and then was drawn to aquaculture simply because there's such a tremendous growth opportunity in aquaculture. The ability to really build the seafood supplies that we need. Sorry, I'm just checking my timer here so I don't run too long. Although, Easton, can you give me a shout when I'm getting to the 15 minutes, please? That's an easier way than me keeping timing myself.
No worries.
Yeah, and so we've been working with offshore aquaculture here in Hawaii, and started up a farm down in Mexico, and we've been looking at opportunities globally. But what I want to speak about today is the perspectives of marine aquaculture, specifically focusing on the US and where there is an opportunity here in US waters to grow this industry. So I'm going to go through the why, the where, the what, the how, and the when. What are the real drivers? Firstly, the why, what the real drivers that underpin this need for more offshore aquaculture. Where are we going to do this? I like the phrase of further and deeper, further offshore and in deeper water. That's where the real growth opportunity is. What are we going to grow there? Which species are most amenable for offshore aquaculture? How we will do this, the technologies that we need to bring to bear, and then when. When is this going to happen? We're going to talk about the legislative challenges and the permit challenges without crossing that line that Easton had so deftly described for us. So in terms of the global drivers behind this, there is abundant exhortations for all of us to be eating more marine fish. It's better for planetary health, and it's also better for you, the consumer, heart health, brain health. There's an abundance of reasons why you should be eating more seafood. This was highlighted most recently by a UN high-level panel on global climate change in the oceans, and one of their major recommendations was that humanity must transition towards more marine-sourced foods, just because you can scale it with less impact. And whilst we really do admire and support our friends that work in freshwater aquaculture, it's a great way to be able to feed the world. But this isn't really, I don't see freshwater fish as a way that we can really drive the change in consumer patterns that we need to see to move consumers towards more aquaculture product. We have more people on the planet, and they've all got more spending power, and they're more aware of the health benefits of seafood. So all of this is going to drive more demand for marine fish. So where is that actually going to come from? Well, as much as we all love fishing, it can't come from just catching more fish. We've squeezed the blood out of that stone pretty hard. This was first most abundantly and forcefully described by Myers and Worm back in 2004, over 20 years ago. They did a survey of fish stocks around the ocean, and they said, well, 90% of the big fish are already gone, and we took them. This was then followed up with a study by Boris Worm and his colleagues that they had extrapolated the trend in fisheries collapse. And by collapse, they meant stocks were down to less than 10% of their original biomass. There's been a lot of lively debate around this extrapolation of this curve that you see here. They were careful to say that it was just a statistical extrapolation. It wasn't a prediction. But it's still fairly scary that the extrapolation goes that by 2048, all of the fish stocks around the planet would have collapsed if that trend were to have continued. Now, there have been some great advances in improved management of fish stocks, but generally, better management of fish stocks just means that we take fewer fish. And so that's clearly not an answer. And where we haven't been able to manage the stocks adequately, things like the Atlantic cod was a spectacular collapse. This was in the early 1990s, went from over 800,000 tons a year to pretty much zero. In 1992, the stock collapsed. They shut the fishery down. And what's really scary is that it has not come back. In 30 years, that stock has not really recovered. And we see the same thing happening also with other stocks around the planet, most notably the small pelagic stocks such as pilchards or sardines. This typical boom and bust that is the bane of fisheries management, and just underscores we can't grow more fish from the wild stocks. We can't grow more seafood supplies from the wild stocks. We have to grow the fish ourselves. And so it's also instructive, I think, to look at the global trends of seafood movement. Essentially, I like to say, we're eating everybody else's lunch. It's a huge industry, $150 billion globally. But then when you look at where the imports are flowing from the capture nations for wild stocks or for other aquaculture, who is doing all of the eating here? It's Europe and it's the US. And there's been also a tremendous growth. This is looking at the imports in billions of dollars to each country over the 15 years from 2002 to 2017. And just over that 15-year period, there was a doubling in the value of imports to the US and EU. This is clearly not sustainable, particularly when we're striving under the current administration. We're wanting to onshore a lot of what at the moment is overseas production in a whole range of technologies. We're using the phrase that we want to onshore that and bring it back to the US. Some of us would posit that the best way to onshore seafood production is offshore. And one final point about the global picture here is that FAO anticipates that we need probably another 40 million tons of seafood before 2050. And that's going to have to come from aquaculture. As I said, it can't come from wild stocks. So where is offshore aquaculture happening? It's actually a really global opportunity here. And this map describes where marine fish farming in exposed sites is happening. And it really is right across the globe, primarily with Seriola and with cobia and barramundi originally. And most of this is in sea stations or in polar circle style net pens. But I would draw your attention to the arrows pointing towards China, because that is where in the last 5 to 7 years, there has been a dramatic increase in the scale of offshore aquaculture. I'll share some more later on the rigs that they are using there, but it portends, I think, where this could be going globally. These are very high value fish in China, the croaker and the corvina, and there's just hundreds of millions of dollars pouring into the investment there. I also like to highlight, when this first map that I showed was just offshore marine fish culture, exposed water, but there was also an abundance of exposed water salmon farming throughout the world, throughout the colder water areas of the world, particularly in sites like Newfoundland. There are sites there on the south coast of Newfoundland that are exposed to the full brunt of the North Atlantic, where the next landfall is Antarctica. And so there is technology there that is readily adaptable to marine fish that is already being developed for salmon farming. So when we talk about offshore aquaculture, that's a difficult phrase to define. I like to think about this as exposed water aquaculture. The US really has a tremendous opportunity for this industry. This is an old map of the US EEZ. Most recently, the US claims have extended up into the Arctic Circle, which means that we now have the largest exclusive economic zone, that is the ocean space that's available to us, the largest EEZ on the planet. We are also the largest seafood market on the planet. So why are we importing around 90% of the seafood that we can consume? It just makes no sense. There's also a tremendous opportunity here for value creation in offshore aquaculture. And the best way to describe that is just by looking at the real estate value that we could create. In the Norwegian salmon industry, farm licenses there sell for around $10 million for each 1,000 tons that the permit allows. So for a salmon farm that allows 3,000 tons to be farmed there, that'll go for around $30 million. if you think of the potential that we could create, the potential value that we could create in this USEEZ, it is truly mind-boggling. It's really exciting. So then, what are we going to grow? Which species? There's a plethora of marine species that have already been farmed. Some are farmed. The cobia up in the top left and the kampachi down in the bottom right are already being farmed in offshore situations. There's also, I think, potential for the red drum, and then for snappers and groupers and mahi-mahi. There are over 20,000 marine species. Not all of them are going to be suitable for offshore aquaculture, in the same way that not all land animals are suitable for agriculture. For agriculture, we've narrowed it down to 10 or 15 species that we actually farm out of all of the animals. The same winnowing is going to happen. The criteria that's going to drive this is, obviously there's going to be a lot of market questions in here. What will people pay for? But there's a lot of biological questions here as well. That's which fish are going to be most suited to offshore situations and to large scale production. And is there a competing fishery? We're not going to want to go and initially be farming species where there is already a viable, stable, wild stock fishery there. Why would we pick that fight? And there's also, I think, tremendous opportunity with the species that we're farming if we can differentiate ourselves through branding. And the branding power, I think Dick has done a tremendous job there with the Hawaiian Kampachi. The branding power for offshore product is really powerful. So when I first started in this industry over 20 years ago, there are a lot of questions about how we're going to do this, just the engineering that is involved. And it's hats off to the engineers that have been working in this space, because now they have resolved most of the major challenges here. This is not the constraint here. There's the traditional polar circle surface pens that are used, as I said, throughout the salmon farming industry in exposed water situations. And then there's also been tremendous scale of the submersible sea stations. These are a really robust architecture on these pens for very highly exposed waters. They're a little bit challenging to have access to your fish because of the closed net over the top. And so some of the technology now that I'm more excited about, such as the submersible polar circle pens. So it's similar to the pen system you see on the right-hand side, but it has a net over the top and it can be submerged. It still allows you then to peel that net off and to be able to access the pen and get access to your fish more readily. So these technologies now allow us to move out into very exposed waters. But what it is tremendous to see is in Norway and China, as I said, in the last 5, perhaps 7 years, there has been tremendous scale up of the net pen operations and the investment to sustain those. On the left-hand side, you see a couple of the systems that are deployed in Norway. On the right-hand side, a couple that are deployed in China. And these are farming thousands of tons of fish at a time. And this is really where I think the future lies for offshore aquaculture and this sort of scale. So in the US, there has been, we've been working for a number of years on a number of opportunities there. And where are we going to be able to do this? And what are the constraints around that? The Villela Epsilon project, I think, is an example of the challenges that we face with the regulatory processes here, because this is really pioneering. And it is, we need to be very conscious of the fact that it's a common property resource here. We're in a public space, and so we do need to be accommodating of the valid concerns of the public for the impacts that this might have. We've been working, the Villela Epsilon project is another one in our demonstration projects. We had a couple of those in Hawaii earlier on, just to be able to show the fishing and boating community what offshore aquaculture actually involves. And so we've been working on the permits for a single net pen of only 20,000 fish. So this is about 1% the size of what a commercial farm would be. And it'll be 40 miles offshore of the coast of Florida in the Gulf of Mexico or America, whichever one you want to call it. We've been working on the permits here since 2018, and we still don't have those permits in hand. Hopefully we will get those this year, but we're not holding our breath. I think this is a challenge for the industry here in the US, that we want to have a rigorous permit structure there. We don't want to have any idiot going out there into the ocean. We want to choose our idiots carefully, but we want to be able to make permits more readily accessible than the 7 year process that we've been working on here just for a demonstration pen here in Florida. We've also been working on the permits for an offshore farm off Oahu here in Hawaii. There was previously a moi farm operating here just to the west of Pearl Harbor off Oahu, and it operated for around 14 years with minimal environmental impact. But when the site closed down in 2013, there has been no follow-on from that. And we'd like to re-establish that operation there to be growing both fish and seaweeds there. We've been very careful with our community outreach there and to not feel like this is something that we're wanting to ram through quickly. But it is still a very protracted process here in state waters, even in Hawaii, where aquaculture is viewed generally very favorably here. That permit process we've been involved in since 2020. That's all I have for the time that I'm allotted. Sorry, Easton, I wasn't looking at my clock, but I'm happy to take questions and hand the microphone across to Dick. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. And you did great. You're only 10 minutes out. No, you're doing perfect. Appreciate you being thorough, and we have plenty of time. So for the sake of time, let's go to Dick, and then a reminder to our audience to ask questions. And I have a couple of things, but appreciate you kicking things off, Neil. Mr. Jones.
Yes, thank you, Easton. Thank you, Neil. The slides okay?
Yes.
All right, so today I'm going to speak a bit about blue ocean mariculture. As Neil said, we are the only open ocean finfish farm in the United States today. I always thank Neil at the beginning of these presentations because he did a lot of the difficult work 20 plus years ago. He started the permitting process here in Hawaii in 2001. And the first fish went in the water in March of 2005. So we are a 20-year-old company here in Hawaii. We grow a fish called a Cereola rivoliana. In the market, the fish is known as a Hawaiian kanpachi. For those of you that don't know, it's a Cereola very similar to a hamachi. We are a fully vertically integrated company, meaning that we have broodstock or mommy and daddy fish that we take the eggs from. We hatch those eggs, grow the fish on shore, and then move them offshore. We then have sales and marketing, administrative functions, and so we take care of those fish from the ocean to the consumer's mouth. But the two most technical touch points within our business are both the hatchery and offshore. So we are fortunate to be here in Kona, Hawaii, and we have access to Cereola rivoliana about a mile off of our shoreline here. So our broodstock currently come from wild fish. We go out and catch those fish live, bring them into our hatchery, acclimate them, and then add them into our broodstock array. We are on a trajectory to start some selective breeding and looking at genetic composition of our fish, but right now we do have that luxury of being just fully wild broodstock. We then grow fish from egg to about 40 to 50 grams on shore. We produce live feeds for the growth of those fish. So after the fish hatch and spend about 5 days feeding on their own yolk sac, we start to feed them zooplankton or rotifers. We then transition about 5 to 6 days afterwards onto Artemia. And then at about 15 days, we introduce a dry feed. We grow the fish in different stages, both in the larval stage and in the kind of older nursery stage onshore. for about 90 days until we transfer them to our offshore net pens. So we grow our fish in these highly engineered net pens offshore. Each pen is about 120 feet from top to bottom. To give you a sense of the scale, the boat in this picture is 75 feet long, so the nets are quite large. You're seeing about half of the net in this picture. So the top of the net looks like a right side up pyramid. The bottom looks like an upside down pyramid. They're attached by a giant rim. The nets are submersibles, so that center spar that goes from top to bottom is pressurized, and there's a ballast at the bottom of the cage. We let air out, the cage lowers, and we raise it in the morning to be able to do the work that we need to do. There's 3 activities that we do every day offshore. I like to say, just like a few humans unfortunately pass away every day, so do a few fish. We need to take those out of the net pens in order to maintain the health and safety of the fish that are in there and make sure no predators try to get in to eat the perished fish. So we take those out. We also harvest, and as you can see in this picture in the foreground cage, there is a net that looks like a big martini glass. That's our harvest cone. We lower this cage to where the mouth of that cone is below the water surface. We throw in a bit of feed to attract the fish, and as the fish are feeding on that bit of feed, we raise the cage up and airlift them onto the vessel when we harvest. We only harvest twice a week, and we do that to order. So if our sales team sells 21,000 pounds of fish on a Tuesday, we go out Wednesday and harvest 21,000 pounds of fish. The third thing we do on a daily basis is feed, and we'll talk about the feed here in a minute. So why did Neil and team choose Seriola rowelliana? Well, as he shared a few minutes ago, it is a exercise to try to figure out which fish are right to grow in the appropriate environment. So Neil's original permit was for 14 different species of fish. They were growing mahi and different groupers and Hawaiian snappers and local fish like moina nue, 2 different types of Seriola, looking at all of those different attributes that Neil shared with you already. And it ended up that Seriola rowelliana was both the best fish in terms of a hatchery environment and also very hardy and resilient. When the fish basically got over a few grams in size, it could really stand up to the elements here. So it's really important to figure out which fish works best in that controlled environment, and especially for the area that you're in. Neil and team also did an amazing job at the outreach to the local community. And, certainly in the beginning, there was not a lot known in terms of the impacts of offshore aquaculture, both to the offshore environment, but also to the local economy and community. And they did a really good job at helping people understand that our role here is to develop a local workforce. We address a lot of issues around food security, and because there was really no local fishery for the wild fish, it was great that we were adding to the food supply within the Hawaiian Islands. Right now, 60% of all the fish that we produce stay within Hawaii. And we keep those economic benefits growing. So right now we have 83 team members. And even though we are quite siloed because of biosecurity and geography, our entire organization is committed to growing high quality fish. And we all have a real strong passion for healthy oceans. And so that binds our organization together. We're also the first farm in the United States of any species to be certified by the Aquaculture Stewardship Council for environmental and social responsibility. When I got to blue ocean mariculture, I wanted to go through an ASC audit because I knew that that would tell me how our organization was performing against a globally recognized standard. And we're fortunate that first time out, we had almost no nonconformities and were able to get certified right away, which is a testament to how the team had been doing for decades now before I arrived. So that it's been a thriving farm for quite a while now. And again, all of our production is sold in the United States, 60% in Hawaii and 40% to the US mainland. But we are currently the only open ocean marine finfish farm in the United States. One of the reasons is that we are here in Hawaii and we are permitted in state waters. Our islands are built from lava, and so our coastline drops off very quickly. We are less than a half mile from the coast of Kona, Hawaii, and yet we're in 200 feet of high energy water. And by high energy, I mean we have a constant current of 1 to 3 knots that forces water through our net pens. It essentially mimics the same type of environment that you would find 10, 20, 30, 40 miles off of the coast of the US mainland and other parts of the world. So even though we're only a half mile from the shoreline, we do consider ourselves open ocean and offshore aquaculture. The other reason that there are no other farms in the US, as you've heard from Neil, is there's a lack of a regulatory pathway for farming in federal waters. There's ambiguity in aquaculture regulatory and management across most federal agencies and issues with the rights of leaseholders that would make investment really high risk. And so as the only open ocean farm, we look at all kinds of things to ensure that as a demonstration to the rest of the world, we're doing things in the right way. And we're also looking at what innovative technological solutions are out there in order for our business to grow and to scale. And so that's really important to kind of understand that how do we continue to drive efficiency into the process to be able to make the farm the most efficient and the most profitable as possible. Well, the first thing is looking at technology, right? So we do a lot to drive what we call intelligent aquaculture. So even though there are a lot of solutions that are coming into the market, as an example of something we do manually, every cohort that we produce in our hatchery needs to be looked at visually, and each fish picked up by hand by one of our team members. Each cohort is about 400,000 fish that we literally take about 2 weeks to look at, that could be done through AI in some form or fashion. But there's a lot of those processes that are still manual that take a lot of effort from our team and teams around the world. So working with small entrepreneurs to come up with viable solutions for intelligent aquaculture is incredibly important for its future. Looking at things like sensors, predictive analysis of data, traceability, and using robotics in our process are all things that we are continually trialing here at Blue Ocean Mariculture. We also try to do more precision farming. So we look at things like our sea station netting. So as you saw in the picture earlier, the top pyramid of our net pens is made of a braided polyethylene, but what you didn't see is the bottom part that's underneath the water is a copper alloy mesh. And that copper we started using in 2014. It's antibacterial and so it doesn't allow for an antimicrobial, so it doesn't allow for the growth of algae in that bottom part of the net. The top part, when we raise the cage up in the morning, bakes in the sun and kills the algae. So we don't use any people power or any kind of chemicals to do treatments of our nets to clean them. Everything is all done organically. We also have real-time environmental monitoring, so I can pull up my cell phone and look at 28 different parameters of environmental monitoring on any one of the sea stations that are offshore. We also do biomass monitoring, and this is something very new to us. It took us about 8 months to develop an algorithm with our partners in Oversea, but we are able now to use this information to assess the size of the fish and the biomass within the cage. There's still no process in place to be able to count the fish, so to know how big the total available biomass is, but just the fact that we're able to segregate and count, weigh artificially each of those fish is a huge step forward for us. We used to do hundreds of fish in a sample just to get the same information we can do now, testing 6,000 fish via AI. But one of the most critical metrics that determines the profitability of our farm is the feed conversion and the growth. Fish health and understanding the best diet for the fish to maximize growth while never compromising on the health and welfare of the actual fish is absolutely paramount. We also need to take the consumer and their preferences into consideration. So unless we have a consumer who will buy our fish repeatedly, we won't have revenue. So we are looking for consistency in our feed, and that includes proteins that other than those that are derived from fish, as Neil shared with you, the availability of small pelagics, which historically have been the source of fish meal and oil, continue to decline. We use things like byproduct of production of fish for human consumption, Alaska salmon and pollock. We've also had ongoing trials with soy. We feel like some of the other protein sources out there, like insect larvae or algae, have some type of application, but our fish are highly carnivorous, and they like a strong protein within their diet to be able to grow and stay healthy. So a lot of that is things that, because we are the only ones in North America doing this, or the US doing this, we need to continue to trial and make sure that we're treating our fish appropriately. That's been a challenge for us, Space for nutritional trials, not just in a few months, but taking the fish throughout its life cycle for a farm that has a finite area that we grow our fish. It's very challenging. So, one of the things that I think would benefit us in the long run is being able to better understand how we do those nutritional trials and look at the growth of our fish more holistically. So on that, I want to say mahalo or thank you to the Soy Aquaculture Alliance and to Easton, and pass it over to you.
Thank you, Dick. Brilliant. So tons to take in. I really appreciate it. I had actually laugh at the irony of the you had AI, sensors, big data analytics, blockchain, robotics, and it was all related to aquaculture farming. It's like I think we're having the exact same conversations about the soybeans in our fields here in Iowa. So it's great to see the parallels in agriculture, both on land and in open oceans. So there are a few questions, and then Neil, I don't know if you have any other questions or areas to expand, or Dick likewise. So let's start with David. David is asking, engineering and financing of large cages must be enormous. Who are the designers and how much is invested in these new designs?
So the design of our net pens has been an ongoing evolution since the early 2000s. Yes, it is a relatively high capital expenditure to get the cages up and running. But what we've seen, especially with the copper alloy that we use for that bottom section of our net pen, we've been able to limit the amount of damage from predators, and we've been able to limit the amount of personnel that we've needed to upkeep those cages. The latest evolution of the company that designs them for us is Innovasi. Have designed those cages specifically for the high energy, high current water environment that's here off of Kona, and they do other cage designs based on the setting that your farm is in. So I think that's one of the most important things that I've learned in my time in aquaculture, and that, again, Neil did the legwork for me, is site selection is just so critical. And then ensuring that you have the right species and the right equipment to be able to ensure as best you can that the risk on your capital, both in terms of your fish and your hard assets, are protected.
Yeah, I might add on there, if I may, Easton, because I'm not sure if David was talking about the sea stations, also talking about the Norwegian and Chinese oil rig ship scale cages that I'd shown there. And I think it's instructive to see that this is happening in China and Norway, which are two countries where the government is very willing to support the growth of offshore aquaculture. There's a lot of government investment, either direct or through loans, and also through permits. In Norway, they were providing additional permits. I talked about the value of Norwegian permits, and the government was providing additional permits for folks that were willing to go out and pioneer new net pen designs in exposed water locations. So government support for that engineering and that scale of operation is really critical. Most of the engineering happens behind the curtain for those sorts of operations, but there is a Dutch company, Pan Ocean Aquaculture, that is now talking more openly about developing these scale of cages. They had designed one of those cages in China, and now they're working with a number of folks to look at application of these cages for salmon production.
Thank you, Neil. So follow question that I had on a similar thread was just, what's the mechanism for financing these things? It's obviously a huge capital investment. I'm assuming it's a combination today of, private, and you just mentioned that these favorable countries have systems within the administration to incentivize and build up those kinds of industries. So, do you have a kind of a vision of how that could, or how it took place for Blue Ocean, and how we should make that, make the just resources and risk management scale for open ocean aquaculture?
I'll speak about my experience and then let Dick add on there. But up until now, it has been pretty much the investment in offshore aquaculture in the US has come from high net worth individuals that have recognized the need and feel a real alignment. So it's from impact investor folks. I think what we'd like to see, what is needed here, is provision. There is, under the Department of Commerce through National Marine Fisheries Service, there is opportunity there for commercial fishing operations to access loans, so that could be used as leverage as we take these projects to larger scale. It's just at the moment there is lively debate around whether aquaculture is technically under Magnuson-Stevens Fishing Act, whether it's called fishing or not. But that would be something that would, I think, be really beneficial for the US industry is if there was favorable loan terms available for the capital costs for this equipment.
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, that's certainly one of the biggest challenges. I mean, you know, from the day Neil started in 2001, it was, 4 years until he got fish in the water and almost 5 until he started to get revenue. And so you really need patient capital, as well as, a significant amount of capital to be able to make the investment to put the infrastructure in place. Because frankly, at the end of the day, scale and being able to leverage your fixed costs is one of the things that is going to drive the profitability into the sector.
Very helpful. Next question. Have you had any instances of, and I'm going to mess this up, ciguatera toxin in your fish? Or does net pen production alleviate the risk relative to wild cereal, in your opinion?
Yes, it does reduce the risk considerably. We've not had ciguatera in any of our fish, and we do test for it.
Perfect. What diseases have been encountered in open ocean cages, and do you have any veterinarians to help with disease issues?
We have a veterinarian on staff. We also have an amazing veterinarian network here in Hawaii, focused specifically on aquaculture and supporting the industry. And so we truly appreciate all of their support. We only encounter an external skin fluke, essentially called a trematode, somewhat similar to what salmon producers see in sea lice. It attaches onto the fish, and but from a disease perspective, we've been incredibly fortunate that we keep a good account of the health and welfare of our fish, and we do a lot of testing if we do see anything that might be happening in order to make sure we keep that under control.
If I might add, this is, I think, one of the great attributes of offshore aquaculture, because generally in aquaculture, it's like any other kind of agriculture, is that the close concentrate confinement of animals where there's not good circulation, or where it's close to the substrate. Like if you kept your hogs or your cattle in really close confinement and weren't flushing it out, you'd expect to have disease issues. So here, as we're able to move out into deeper water, further offshore, where there are stronger currents, it's just better from an environmental perspective. It's better from a fish health perspective, where you've got more separation from the fish in the pen and the substrate, the sea floor underneath the pen. That is usually going, the substrate, the seafloor, is going to be the reservoir for any cysts or any eggs that will allow those parasites to come back and reinfest the fish. And so deeper water with stronger currents means that just generally you are reducing all of the feedback loops that are possible there. And that's one of the things that makes us really excited about the scalability of this industry.
Excellent. We're going to just keep doing shotgun questions here with our limited time, so slow me down if you need to. Next question is, can you comment on the quality and nutrition of the fish relative to North Atlantic farm salmon?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I mean, I think, we can look at it in a couple of different ways. We do nutritional panels of our fish for every new cohort that we go into and make those available to our customers. We're certainly going to have a different fat level based on some salmon and better than others, right? I mean, not all salmon are created equal. So, Norwegians might be different than Chileans or will be different than Chilean and so on and so forth, right? And you have fish grown in New Zealand that have really high, fat content. And so it's really about the quality, which we do a lot to ensure that the quality of our fish remains high and as a premium product. And we try to make the fish as nutritious as possible. I don't really know that it is comparable to another species of fish, but we do our best to maintain our high quality and premium.
Excellent. Feed related question. What are your feed and feeding challenges?
We recently installed both automated feeding and pellet detection cameras in our offshore. When I first arrived at Blue Ocean, so less than 5 years ago, divers were in the water underneath the cage holding a buoy, and when pellets started to drop through, they would let the buoy go to alert the top to stop feeding. And now we do a lot in terms of ensuring that the feeding itself is being utilized to the best of our ability. In terms of the feed and the feed formulations, we have amazing partners in our feed suppliers, and we're constantly looking at levels of all of the proteins and lipids and everything that the fish need to survive and thrive. And so again, we're kind of, as they say, building the plane as we're flying it in a lot of ways, because there isn't a lot of testing like there is in salmon or tilapia shrimp production. Kampachi is an emerging species, and we're learning as we go. But right now, we're continuing to make our process as efficient as we can.
Yeah, to draw on both the conversation we had again last spring was, soy, currently has a limited share in specifically marine species, and I know for your operation, we had a really good conversation about that. And then you just mentioned today that part of the challenge is it's very difficult to do a life cycle analysis and optimization of a feed trial, because you're having enough trouble just getting in the water to grow fish with whatever you do have. So
Yes, sir.
I guess, Neil, I know we talked about this as well, but and you have certainly something to say, but I'm curious from our perspective is, how do we support the growth of this on the feed side, and how do we help that scale and this discovery and optimization process as we move forward and we solve all of the permitting problems, we do get more pens in the ocean. What's that outlook look like, and what can we as a soybean industry do to support?
Yeah, I think there's already been, tremendous support from the soy industry for a lot of the feed development work that we had done earlier on with the Kampachi, initially we were looking at soybean meal and soy oil, and then we were looking at soy protein concentrates. We were able to get very good growth performance on the fish on a reduced fish meal level with up to 40% of soy protein concentrate. And we're also working with some of the folks from University of Nebraska that had been developing a soy oil that had EPA and then eventually DHA. The EPA beans work really. EPA is one of the two main fish oil types of oils in fish oil. The EPA beans worked really well. The DHA not so much. There were issues with those beans. But there's still tremendous potential as we move forward to be able to be applying soy to the diets for carnivorous fish such as the Kampachi. We're also really excited about and very grateful to Soy Aquaculture Alliance and the US soy industry for their support for some trials which are about to start here in Hawaii with Nanue, which has been mentioned a couple of times. For those that don't know this fish, it's a drummer or a chub. And it's a fish that's native throughout the warm waters of the world, and it's an herbivore. It actually makes a living in the wild, turning seaweed into fillets of fish. And we like to think of it as something that you can feed it a tilapia diet, and it tastes like a snapper. So it doesn't need to have the high protein and fish oil constituents that something like a Kampachi does. And so we think species such as Nanue or any of the other herbivorous fish that might be suited to aquaculture, there's a lot of potential to use soybean meal or soy protein concentrate at much higher levels. And that then reduces the pressure on the wild fish stocks, and it makes a better deal for US soybean farmers. So we're really grateful for the support of the US soy industry for that research.
Thanks, Neil. We're excited to get that project off the ground too. So I recognize we're at our scheduled time, so maybe I'll ask one more question to wrap things up, and I apologize to the questions we didn't get to, except for my team, which I appreciate you all jumping in and asking questions as well. But one of the kind of other tie-ins I'd like to draw back to SA support is on the consumer education and engagement side. So I know, Neil, you're a part of the initial work for Blue Ocean, and you're certainly active on the, our opportunity in the Gulf. So could you talk about the work you've done for educating consumer markets and earning social license? And then I have maybe a part two of that is, how do we, more broadly speaking, improve the, average pound of seafood consumption per American consumer? Because I know we're a large importer, but we're not a large, seafood, at least where I'm in the Midwest, right, is a very limited part of the traditional diet. So it's an accessibility and a culture challenge. So two-part question there, and we'll end on this if you don't mind commenting briefly.
Commenting briefly, right? That's the challenge.
Briefly.
This is really,
it's your time. I got all afternoon.
This is the real nub of how we grow this industry is that we need broader support from the community, and that's going to come from as they become more familiar with it. This was the intent of our Velella projects, to just let the fishing and boating community see that actually offshore aquaculture is just fish in the water. And if you do it as Dick said, sighting is critical. If you do it in a good location with good water movement, the environmental impact is really minimal. Dick's environmental monitoring there, if folk want to go and dig more deeply into that operation has been there for 20 years, and there's been no significant impact on the water quality or the substrate, the seafloor underneath the pens, or just it's half a mile away from pristine coral reef where people are diving on that reef every night, because that's where the
remember you almost drowned me on that reef.
But it's I think getting people more familiar with the fact that this can be done in an environmentally responsible manner. Blue Ocean Mariculture certification by Aquaculture Stewardship Council, that counts for a lot. But I think just getting the message out to folk more, getting the fish out in front of folk more, and getting more demonstration pens in the water is going to be the way that we change that. Nick?
Yeah, I agree. I didn't introduce myself at the beginning of my presentation, but I've been doing this for 40 years and was in retail for 15 of that. And I think that it's always difficult to get the message down to the consumer level. We do need to increase per capita consumption. As an example of, some of the potential opportunity here in Hawaii, per capita consumption of seafood is double what it is on the US mainland. And it's because we have a seafood centric community and cultural history here of people eating seafood. I think that we need to start with educating the youth. And one of the challenges that we have is we tend to get really deep into the complicated supply chain of seafood, when we should just be talking about seafood the same way that the beef people talk about beef, or the chicken people talk about chicken, right? We don't need to get into, is it farmed or wild? Is it imported or not? I think just starting with eat more seafood and you'll be more healthy is a great message that we can then carry on and build on growing the consumer base.
Excellent. Well, you've received a few rave reviews in the questions and comments, and I'll echo the same. I'm so appreciative, Neil and Dick, of your time and expertise and your friendship. Now, I know we've gotten to know each other quite a bit over the years, and I appreciate all the work you're doing. So we'll end on that note. If anyone that attended or watches this recording afterwards has questions or follow-up, please don't be afraid to reach out to me directly. It's easton@soyaquaculture.org. Or you can stay in touch with our research, our other education opportunities, future webinars by connecting with us on the SAA website. So with that, we will close and get you all back to your day and enjoy beautiful Hawaii.
Thank you very much, Easton. Thanks, Dick.
Take good care.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Mala, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.